Oh.
And welcome those present. Thanks, Matt. In attendance, and advise that the meeting will be recorded in accordance with Council Policy titled Electronic Recording of Council Meeting Policy Meetings of Council to assist in the preparation of minutes and ensure a true and accurate account of debate and discussion at the meetings is available. We now have an acknowledgement of country. Circular Head Council acknowledges the Northwest Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of the country on which we stand, meet and play. We recognise that continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. We'll now stand for prayers. Prayers tonight will be by Matthew Fisher, and then we'll do the Lord's Prayer, and then Matt's going to lead us in a minute's silence for our departed Queen.
Good. Well, I'll just read from Matthew chapter 6, and this is the Lord's Prayer. It says, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. So, Father God, we thank you for this opportunity to discuss the issues that may be coming up, Lord, in this community, in this area of Circular Head. And Father, I pray for wisdom, Lord, for everyone in the room here tonight, and even as there's elections that are coming up, Lord, in the next few months, I just pray that, Lord, that the right people would take a step forward, and that the right people would be put in the right positions, Lord, to lead this community forward. Thank you for this. Amen. And now we'll just have a minute's silence, obviously, for the Queen that's just passed away.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Go on to apologies. We have two tonight, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Woodward. We'll now have need a motion for the minutes of last meeting. Is somebody prepared to move that?
So moved.
Thank you. Seconded?
Yes, Matt.
Thank you. No queries on the accuracy of the minutes?
Mr Mayor, we haven't got a query on the accuracy of the minutes, but we did have charged the General Manager with finalising the draft with the heritage. Has that been done, and was there many modifications?
Oh, through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I've met with the Heritage Centre, and we have negotiated out the MOU, and I'm just waiting on that to come back. They were having a meeting and going to take it to their members, and when that comes back, I think we'll be ready for signing.
Thank you.
Nothing further. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Issues raised by councillors. 3-1, 3-2, 0, 3-3. There's an answer there to Councillor Redland's question. 3-4, Councillor questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? None. Pecuniary interests. Are there any pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary conflict of interests?
The Mayor, just enclosed item 18.2, non-pecuniary.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else? Now need a motion for items 5, 6 and 7. Somebody prepared to move that? Councillor Redland.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ives Harris. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Item 5 is notification of workshops. Questions on those? No. Mayor's appointments. Any questions on those? No, and we don't have any late agenda items. So we'll move along to public questions, and there's nobody here, so
Read it out.
that will be a nil. We'll go down to 9, which is notices of motion. Councillor Redland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that the council acknowledges the loyalty and commitment of the staff that have served the district during this current term of council. The first year was certainly different for all of us to the following 3 years, and I'd just like to acknowledge all of those who have given what they have to get us where we are now, and to acknowledge the loyalty. In a remote rural area such as this, it can be difficult for staff to separate their work from their personal identity, and as community members they are affected by what happens at council, even though they have limited ability to influence the outcomes. And thinking of the business continuity and the emergency management that happened across the district, that was certainly something that was uncalled for and spontaneous. So I think that we should show our appreciation and recognise their part in keeping essential services running at a time they were needed more than usual by the community, and I think that an appropriate gesture should be determined by council with the General Manager.
Thank you. Is somebody prepared to second that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Poski. I'll put the... Is any further discussion, sorry? None? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Notice of motion 9.2, Councillor Roldager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to move the motion of condolences for Her Royal Highness. I'll just wait for somebody to second.
Somebody second?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Blizzard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In moving this condolence motion, I think it's very appropriate coming from this community. I know that there's a number of us around here who have lived through the entire reign of Queen Elizabeth II. Some of us don't remember that a lot about the first part, but there is probably one here that would remember everything that went on.
Big statement.
But she has been an integral part of society, whether not only the British but to the Commonwealth itself, and she has kept herself clean of any political persuasions and kept her views to herself, and she must be commended for that, because it wouldn't be easy. And the royal family now are, you know, on display every night of the week, and it must be very traumatic for them, and you know, we send our condolences to them and ask the council to fully support it.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. We'll now go on to planning. So I just need to remind councillors we're now sitting as a planning authority. We do have one tonight, 10.1. I think we have George doing this report for us. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Mayor and all aldermen, councillors. I'll give a brief overview of the application to begin with. So the application is for partial demolition and modifications of an existing single dwelling at 22 Honeyrigia Road in Helier. The existing dwelling is split level, located at the rear of the site toward the coastal frontage, where the site does rise. The proposed development will see essentially the footprint remaining the same, and then there'd be some modifications to the existing basement or lower ground floor, modification of the existing upper ground floor, and then a new level constructed on top of that. In terms of the floor plans, they have been inserted into the planning report. Probably the key thing to mention here is that there is an encroachment into the rear setback slightly further than the current building line that's on the site. That'll occur in the northwestern section primarily. The windows relative to the western boundary on the existing dwelling will remain the same. There will be some new windows on the western side of the new floor level. The key issues from a planning perspective, or the two key discretions related to boundary setback and also to site coverage. With respect to the boundary setback, the zone is low density residential, albeit they are relatively small lots. They're around 700 to 800 square metres, which is fairly typical of general residential zone land. The key difference between general residential zone land and low density is servicing. So it is quite a peculiar situation where we do have higher density established development, yet we don't have the services of high density zone land. So that being said, we're dealing with different setback and planning scheme parameters. In terms of the setback for the low density residential zone, they are set at a value. It's different to the general residential zone where we have a building envelope, where basically your setback is determined by the height of the building. So effectively every metre of height you go up in the general residential zone, you need to step back another metre. In this instance, there is a set 5 metre setback for rear and side boundaries and an 8 metre setback for the frontage. Frontage setback complies, but the rear and the side boundaries don't comply. It's worth noting that even if this was a single story dwelling, single height dwelling, it still wouldn't satisfy the acceptable solution of a 5 metre setback, and it would remain discretionary. I think the best way to describe the setbacks visually is, it's on page 12 of the planning report. I don't know if there's a page within the agenda, but I believe that this page is the same as within the agenda.
34.
It's figure 5.
Page 34.
So if you've got that in front of you, what we've put there is there's red envelopes within each of the, on the site itself, which is central, and then the 2 adjacent lots or adjoining and adjacent lots to the east and west. So if those lots were vacant lots, that's effectively what each lot has to work with regards to setbacks if they wanted to satisfy the acceptable solution. So we can see quite clearly that the existing dwellings don't currently satisfy that, and it would be very difficult to have new buildings satisfy that even if it was a vacant lot. It's quite a narrow strip of land that they have to work with. So that's one matter to point out, that we are dealing with fairly constraining acceptable solutions or permitted pathway, if you like, standards. The other key discretion relates to site coverage, and again, the figure that's provided in page 17 of the planning report, which is figure 6, that provides a visual representation of site coverage, and it also provides a table detailing the indicative site coverage of each of those lots that have been selected as well. So those are the two key discretions. Each of the performance criteria I have addressed within the planning report, and noting that based on my assessment and the review of the application, I've formed the opinion that the performance criteria have been satisfied. If I turn to the representation that has been received, it's for the adjoining dwelling to the west. Key points that have been summarised on page 8 and 9 of the agenda at the table relate to blocking of sunlight to windows on the adjoining dwelling to the west, a loss of privacy, and the concern relating to on management of on-site wastewater. The first concern relating to sunlight, I did review several tribunals around determining what's unreasonable and what impacts are considered reasonable and unreasonable in residential settings in these developments. The view that's formed in this situation is that it's recognised that those areas of some parts of the east-facing window and the balcony, again, this is within the report on page 13, will lose or be impeded by the proposed dwelling for morning probably to midday in winter, but early morning to mid-morning in summer of sunlight, where it wraps around until it wraps around the dwelling. But in this instance, the view is that we've got an unimpeded north aspect, which includes the balcony and habitable room windows, which will receive sunlight. And on that basis, form the view that those parts of the dwelling of the adjoining dwelling will receive sunlight, and therefore believe it meets the performance criteria. The matter relating to the overlooking, the windows on the upper ground level, so the existing level that's there will be retained. There will be some new windows on the additional floor above. These will be windows to bedrooms where there is generally a higher amount of privacy provided due to the nature of the bedroom. People generally, when privacy is required, they'll draw the blinds. It is slightly different to an open plan living area where, generally speaking, probably in this location, you'd be having the windows clearly facing the vista to the north. The other point that I've made in there, the location of the windows, they've got a reasonably high sill level, about 1.3 metres, and also any overlooking is going to be oblique down into the balcony and into windows, and it'll generally be over the roof of the adjoining dwelling. So there is limited opportunity for direct overlooking, which is where I form the view that sort of privacy is reasonable. It's noted that this is a particular, and I did look through the scheme, the performance criteria that are relied upon, they don't specifically raised privacy as considerations. That being said, I have considered it and based on the assessment, I'm of the view that it does satisfy the performance criteria. There was another matter around the height of the building. The key point here, I guess, is that it does satisfy the building height acceptable solution. In this instance, it's around about 6 metres, 6.5 metres at the northern end toward Hellier Beach, and then due to the topography of the land, it slopes down. The building subsequently gets higher at the southern end, with the highest point actually at the southeastern end, which is adjacent to the public walkway. So it is entirely within the height acceptable solution. As I raised earlier, even if this was a single-storey dwelling, then the setback issue still remains. So there doesn't appear, based on the structure of this particular provision, there doesn't appear to be a correlation between height and setback. It's sort of one and the other. Whereas as I said, in the general residential zone, there's a correlation between setback and height. The other item that had been raised by the representatives related to on-site wastewater. This one is certainly a valid question given the amount of development. There is going to be a little bit more of building footprint or area of the site being taken up by building, which relates to the shed, the carport, an extension which is on the southern side of the building, and then obviously given that it's in an unserviced area, it does need to be the wastewater and stormwater needs to be managed on site. This isn't a planning matter as such. It's not dealt with in the planning scheme. It's only dealt with in the planning scheme if you're subdividing land. So this particular matter would need to be addressed at the building application stage. And what would happen is it's either going to be able to be satisfied, and there's sufficient area within the site to support the proposed development. If there's not, then there might need to be modifications to the development, but that would need to be addressed at that point. I think that's the general summary, and I'm happy to present the application to you for your discussion.
Thanks, George. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Mr Mayor, if you don't mind, I would move a procedural motion that we go into committee to just have some discussion about this, because I think there's a few issues here. George has touched on a few, but I think we need a general discussion.
Yeah, you moved that?
Yeah, give a second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Voposki, I think was first. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Oh, sorry, yep, aye.
Against? Carried. So we're now in committee.
Well, one of the George raised it is the setback. You know, sure there's some other buildings there, but these setbacks is it just sort of starts to alarm me. If you start to keep letting these sort of things happen, you know, why have you got setbacks in the planning scheme? And the other issue that concerns me, and George is the wastewater. My understanding is, and George just indicated it's a building matter, but my understanding is it's not allowed to leave your place.
That's right.
And so therefore, if it's a problem, it ought to be identified here up front.
I think he's already addressed it, and
He didn't address the number of new WCs just going from 1 to 4, and that's going to take more water.
Yep. Got anything more to say on that, George, other than what you've already mentioned?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. I'd be, if it's reasonable, and I share those same concerns about on-site wastewater. Certainly under the Building Act, they're not allowed to discharge any wastewater basically onto another site. And similarly, under the Urban Drainage Act, you're not allowed to discharge concentrated stormwater across the boundary either. So there are certainly requirements under the building legislation that need to be dealt with. It's just at this stage, within the planning scheme, it's something that's not dealt with, and there's no, for example, if it was a matter of a point of refusal, it wouldn't be, as you'd be aware, with refusal grounds, they need to be tied to performance criteria, and it may be that would need, it may not be a possibility, or it might not have strength as to its merits. It's a difficult one. I can definitely see the concerns that have been raised by yourselves and the representative. But in this situation, it's something that squarely lies within the building application stage.
Yeah, which means that if that happens, well, then they might have to change it, but it doesn't happen in this one. The other part of it is that it's really difficult if we've seen that a number of people have encroached on the 5 metre zone, so you allow some and then not allow others, and it's a bit of a catch-22, I guess.
But if we allowed that, or is that just somebody decided to do, thinking it was a good idea to be out there, and then it's picked up after?
Well, the last few that we've done, I mean, some of those we've actually improved on in the last few years, and they haven't had the 5 metre as well. So, you know, can you allow some to encroach on that 5 metres and some not to?
And I appreciate your comment, but it's just, you know, can we keep going on doing this?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, and that's something that it makes it difficult when you do it for one, and then you just be rule for all, and you do it for others. But yeah, I'm not saying it's right, because I hear what you say. If we do have it, well then, should we all of a sudden stop it? But then that makes it,
especially if that's recent times. Like if something was there 20 years ago, slightly different setups. But if that's in recent times,
well, it's happened in our time. I know of a couple out there that's actually, well, I know at least 2 in the last 4 or 5 years that's actually been built.
It probably never come to this council because there was no representation.
Probably right.
potentially right, yeah.
Potentially right. Yeah.
Mr Mayor, I've got a concern. I can't understand how the planning went without a shading report. I'm reading a note, and it was raised by the representation, that shading is an issue. There's no shading report, so I find it difficult to accept this planning report. And can George tell me categorically that will there be rooms into the house on 22 that won't receive sunlight at all during the day? Because we haven't got a shading report to verify it.
I need to respond to that one.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Look, the primary reason that I didn't consider it necessary to request a shadow diagram is purely based on the orientation or the aspect of the lot. In this case, the long axis virtually faces north. It certainly recognised that there will be a level of impact of direct sunlight that may be that the proposed upper level is likely to cause a loss of morning sunlight, but based on the orientation, that's only going to be for sort of early to mid-morning, maybe around midday, as I said, in the longer days, longer months. but from midday onwards, there's unimpeded sunlight, and basing it on as I said, the research into most of the tribunal decisions, and also having regard to the other parts of the planning scheme, and the general residential zone does provide a little bit more guidance there, and certainly the previous one did. It talks about periods in which you can have what's considered reasonable. So the test generally has been greater than 3 hours of sunlight during a day, and in this instance, on the shortest day, the shortest day of the year, you're going to have unobstructed sunlight from the north from about midday, a bit before onwards. So that's the reason. I'm not saying that there's not going to be any impact of overshadowing on the adjoining property. The test is talking about whether or not the level of impact is reasonable or unreasonable. And in this instance, given that it's a reasonably dense area that's been developed over time, and the amount of sunlight that will be received by the adjoining dwelling and won't be impeded by the proposed development, I've considered it to be reasonable in this instance. Probably one thing to note is that the setback to the western boundary it effectively remains the same. So the building line's been established by the existing dwelling, which is around about 2.49 metres, 2.5 metres. So that setback doesn't decrease at all. The only setback that does decrease is to the rear, noting that does have a little bit of an implication of sunlight as well. So the building's not getting closer to the adjoining property to the west, and there's around about 4.6 metres of distance between the two dwellings. So there is a light court that's provided between the two dwellings, which will allow, if it doesn't allow direct light, it would allow ambient light or indirect light from entering into those locations as well. So hopefully that might assist you with your concern.
Thank you. Any further questions?
That really indicates to me that we really should have had a shading report to see that. It worries me that there's rooms in the representative's house that won't get sunlight. Like I hear what you're saying, you're going to get it around the north. I'm not quite sure what's in the rooms, whether they're kitchen or bedroom or whatever, but I really have a problem here, and I hear what the planner says, with blocking out the sunlight in their area, and some rooms are not going to get sunlight.
By saying that they won't get sunlight till midday, so they'll get
The question was, is there any rooms there that won't get any sunlight?
Because of this building, as well, according
well, I think
from what I hear.
I think, well, how do we know? We haven't got a shading report.
We've got a planner's report, and he said that from midday onwards there'll be light in every room.
Is there any rooms? He hasn't answered the question. Is there any rooms that won't get any sunlight?
Because of this building?
Because of the extension of the building.
Well, the answer to that would be no, there's no rooms. Would that be right, George, because of this building?
Look, when the representation was received, we got some. It focused on the balcony and the kitchen window, which were, as I understood, to the north. So that's where I really focused the assessment to ensure that those were going to be okay. I think there's another window further south of the on the eastern side of the adjoining dwelling. That will still receive light. The question would be talks about here the performance criteria talks about an unreasonable loss of amenity caused by sunlight to well, or lack of sunlight to private open space and windows of habitable rooms on adjoining properties. So it depends on how we view sunlight. It doesn't specifically say that it needs to be direct sunlight. And sunlight can be, as I said before, it can either be ambient, indirect or direct. I think in this instance, given there is fairly significant light course between the two buildings, I think there's a greater distance between the two buildings as well, based on that southern window, that I'd be reasonably comfortable that that's going to receive sunlight and a reasonable amount. But to answer the question, is there any room as a result of this building? I can't say for certain. As I said, the key focus on the assessment, particularly in relation to the representation, was those larger areas of the balcony and the northern window that were raised.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, we need to go back to order. The motion now to resume. Yep.
Same as.
Thanks, Councillor Aldo
Second.
and Councillor Ratman. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. We now have the recommendation. Are we happy to move it or refuse it?
Can we comment on it?
No, not till after we get a motion. Councillor Aldo.
Given the nature of planning, I'm happy to move the recommendations that are before us to proceed. And I say that with all sincerity because unless there's some words somewhere to tell us to put it in properly, because if it goes to appeal, is first question they'll ask the tribunal of the planner is what was your recommendation? If we didn't have some words there to refute that, and I haven't heard anybody put up any words to be able to refute that, so therefore I'd move the recommendations.
Somebody prepared to second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thanks, Councillor Hine. Councillor Boston.
Yes, Mr Mayor, it's difficult here to make this assessment without a shading report, and therefore I can't. I wish there was a way, and I'm not sure you may know, sir, of delaying it until we get a shading report, because it concerns me. There's rooms in that building that won't receive direct sunlight, which I think is important to the area and to the building. So, is there a way of delaying the application until we get a shading report?
That would depend on whether. My understanding, we're on a time limit, and so we'd either need to, but I'm not sure what that time limit is. But I wouldn't think that it'd go for another 5 weeks. But George might be able to tell us if we held it over, whether that can happen or can't happen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we asked for an extension of time to get to this meeting because of the representation, which obviously needed to extend the statutory time period. It is possible to do that. It's difficult now because it would require the applicant agreeing to a further extension of time in order to obtain that information. The risk involved with that is if a decision is not made tonight based on the recommendation either way, we potentially run into an issue of what's called Section 59, which is the failure to make a decision on the application. So if that's the case, then the risk is that if it's appealed and it was determined that a decision wasn't made, there's effectively an automatic cost implication, which means that council needs to cover the costs of effectively the appellants throughout the appeal. So my recommendation would be that a decision should be made to avoid a costs application. Whether or not the appellant is willing to make to extend it, it just depends on exactly when this extension of time was to. But I suspect that it would be tonight. Generally, is the case. So yeah, it would be tight. But as I said, I think that it would be best to make a decision to avoid a cost application if it was appealed and a decision wasn't made.
Yep.
So I don't think I've provided any clarity there. But
Yeah, no, you have. I mean, you're
certainly there's a risk in not making a decision.
basically stating if we don't make a decision, that's a risk that we would have to take.
A question.
Councillor Hine.
Is there any average cost that would be if we did delay it and to the cost of the council?
I don't think anybody would know that because...
So there's no average or something, in past precedences or... Right. Thank you.
It's far better off to make a decision one way or the other.
Yep.
Any further speakers?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to note that a lot of the planning applications has the aspect of goodwill, and I'm not sure if there's any type of recourse through the Building Act, but I know that we have had submissions for that area with quite sophisticated sewerage systems as part of the application. So I just think that even if it's a note for ourselves, that we should be trying to do that consistently. And to note the officers' reports there, in particular the environmental health officer, about that sewage treatment, it sort of came as a bit of a surprise, but we take the George Walker's advice on that aspect of the fact that it's not for us to decide, that it should go through the Building Act. So accept that, but also note that we have had others with those sophisticated sewage systems for the area.
Any further speakers for or against? If not, do you want to close the debate?
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. In closing debate, you're right, we do have to make a decision. And I understand the frustrations of shading and all those sort of things that people have raised, but the reality has got to this, after asking some of those questions, to make it very clear as to what we're doing here, is if we don't accept George's report, then we've got to sit here for another so long to come up with some words as to why we've rejected it. And I don't think we need to be going through that part. And I think we need to accept what the planner has told us here tonight and get on with business.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. We now come to 11.1, the...
Let George go now, I think.
Oh, yeah, thanks, George.
George.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Bye.
Annual update on resource sharing between Waratah Wynyard and ourselves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just wait while that call is... Yes, so through you, Mr Mayor, this is a report that we try to bring you annually, goes to each council, and details the what's happened in the resource sharing arrangement throughout the year. And I think it's fair to say that this resource sharing arrangement that we have is going to become even more important as the Future of Local Government review goes through. And I and Shane have been working on strengthening it with that in mind. So I commend the report.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move the
Over,
report?
Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ives Harris. Councillor Redland. Any discussion? Councillor Oldacre?
In supporting the report, Mr Mayor, it's absolutely fundamental that we have this resource sharing with our neighbours. In fact, it'll be far better being in cooperation with our local councils than trying to get cuddled up to the Cradle Coast Authority. For various reasons, I'm not going into that tonight. But the reality is, this is something that was started by this council and Warratowinian back in 2007, I think. Memory serves me correct, sir. And it's been working, and there's been some changes over that time, and but it's still there, and we're still prepared to talk and get on with it. So, thank you.
Good. Any further speakers? Councillor Popusky.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I was just wondering, in supporting the nature of the resource sharing, can the General Manager tell us how many of these people live within the district, and the start time for travel, is that from their permanent station, or is it start time as normal in the other council?
Through you, Mr Mayor, if I understand you correctly, I'm not quite sure off the top of my head how many actually live in the Circular Head municipality, and they would, if they're working here for the day, then Tracy, as an example, might aim to be here by 8:30. So
The start time would be at the station they're working that day, at the council they're working on that day.
Yeah. And we allow a bit of flexibility for travel time.
There's no problem with that. I'm just trying to work out the hours of the day. You know, the length of like we might say that we've got one day, but it may be 6-hour day instead of an 8-hour day. That's what I was trying to confirm. That's all.
Well,
no doubt they'd probably go on more than 8 hours.
Well,
too.
definitely. It might be physical presence for one day, but throughout the week there's the interaction and the work being done and the engagement, if you like.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. It was just something else.
Any further discussion? Councillor?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I think just like to touch on the fact that we are in a bit of a skill shortage. I think that all the best plans for these types of resource sharing are really just plans until the people actually try and enact them. And those relationships are absolutely key to the quality of the value of what we receive from these things. And I just looking through some of the topics, the quality that we've received from that resource sharing, I believe, is a really high value. And I've been part of, with Chetty, to do a team which has benefited from this type of resource sharing program, as well as with the infrastructure for our IT and those sorts of platforms. And I really see that as a strength and a foundation for a lot of the topics that we cross. And I, as well as the sector reform, I think that we really do have a good connection there with the relationships, and I think that the value's been really noticeable in terms of quality of what we're receiving. So I think it's actually commendable, because we can sit here and it comes culture from the top. If we sit here and say this is what we want done, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be able to be implemented on the ground. So I think it's critical that at this level that we can encourage that. So I think it looks to me from where I sit that it's positive. It's a really positive contribution.
Thank you. Any further speakers? The only other thing that I'd like to add, I think because of the review of local government, I think it becomes even more important in the next year or two, because without resource sharing and sharing, probably even pushing it out, our boundaries out a bit with a couple of other councils is probably going to be important as well. But I think that that's going to stand us in much better stead because of the review that's happening. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 11.2, community grants. Tracy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. So tonight we've got consideration of the round one community grants program. We've had some discussions around the grants that have come in. We're making a recommendation for all of the grants that were put forward to be funded. There is $32,842 worth of activity that's going to occur as a result of the grants, with an investment from council of about $18,500. And I guess that's the value of these grants, is that it is with that bit of funding from council that communities can go out and do things that they may not otherwise be able to do. I guess looking at the applications, there's certainly a number of applications for equipment, which is really good. Often community groups hire or borrow or use inferior equipment. So if we can get better equipment, that's good. That's great. There's also grants that will support not just one club, but the whole community that they sit in, because they're getting a piece of equipment that then will be able to be used by all different people in the community, and also that's supporting clubs. So that's our grants program for your consideration.
Mr Mayor, I just realised I've probably got a perceived conflict with number 6. I'd rather not vote, if that's okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Blizzard.
Yes,
Councillor
I'll
Hine seconded.
that. Thank you.
We had some discussion last week. I don't expect there'll be anything more, but is there any discussion at all? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Smith and Marino.
Yep, that's with me, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this is a procedural, really largely a procedural motion. I was made aware that we needed to do some public notification process, and that the August report should have been considered in open session with the financial details in confidential. So this report is correcting that, and also we will now be able to put the public notice on the site itself for 21 days. And that is really the purpose of bringing this report tonight. If there are any representations made as a result of that notice, those will be responded to by officers unless they are such that they need to be returned to council. But that will have to be for the new term of council, as the October meeting shouldn't really be considering matters of significance. It's because of where it is in the election cycle.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Yes, I'll
Thanks, Councillor Hine. Councillor Redland, second. Any discussion? Thought so. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 12.1, financial.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Before you we have the financial reports for the period ending 31st of August 2022. Received no applications for first homeowners grants for August, with 3 in total which came in July. Got the closing funds there for the special committees. Currently we've got a surplus of 7.5 million in the profit and loss statement. As said last month, we strike our rates in July, so that gives the overinflated look of having a large surplus in the first few months of the year. But as we move through each month and we start to expend our employee costs, etc., and do our work, that reduces down to hopefully somewhere near our budget for the year. In terms of the financial position or the balance sheet of the council, we've currently got a little bit over 254.7 million in community equity. We've currently got 9.1 million at call for investments, and hopefully with interest rates on the move a little bit, we don't have any loans at the moment either, so that will be a positive for the council, and hopefully we'll be able to get some good term deposits coming around soon. In terms of cash, we've got 22.1 million at the end of August. And in terms of rates collection, page 92, we've currently got 36.03% outstanding, which is a little higher compared to 32.05%, so it's 4% we've collected less this time compared to the same time last year. In terms of sundry debtors, we've got a balance of 391 compared to 707. That's always an interesting one with voice, especially grant funding. For large amounts, it tends to throw the figures out, and it's very hard to compare year against year, so the 60 plus days is probably the one to look at there. And that's about all, Mr Mayor. I'll present the report for Council's consideration.
Thank you. Prepared to move the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Riley.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Somebody like to second it?
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor, the question we get inundated with calls, like we've had all, some people, their rates, they're saying they've gone up to enormous, and I thank our financial officer for the email that she sent round to say we could all be talking the same language. And when you're going through these numbers like this tonight, it just crossed my mind is there a figure that of that $22 million, just as an example, is there a figure of how much that is held for depreciation? Because that's lifting that figure. And the ordinary people on the street think, why are our rates going up? You've got all this money. But they're not understanding of what that depreciation schedule is. Now, you might want to take that question on notice and come back. But I think it's worth having that discussion.
Information out to people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I just note and look forward to seeing the term deposits grow as the interest rate has gone up. Although for probably negative for some of the interest rate going up, but I think for this organisation it will be a positive for our ratepayers going forward. Thank you.
Any further on Councillor Foster?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I heard the financial officer tell us that 31% of the rates have been collected. How do we set that with the figure in actual 2023 of 9 million that we've, what do you mean we've actually, have we actually received that money when you're saying that only 34%? I think you've explained this to me before, but I'm only a backyard accountant.
So basically what it does is works out, we'll work out how much we had owing at the start of the year. We raised a certain amount, and then we reduce it by the amount that people have paid, which gives you a figure. And then you work that out as a percentage of what you actually raise for the year. So basically what it's saying is that people have paid 4% less than what they have at the same time last year. So I reckon that probably means that some people haven't paid and got the discount either. So there's probably some figures around that as well. But yeah, basically, and the rates have obviously gone up 4% as well too. So there's a few things that are probably added to that. So people have paid less.
Cash flow.
Cash flow, yeah, the cash is.
I think you may have missed this question or I didn't explain, but in that number, first figure of 9,400,000, we've got it down as an asset, your total income. We've got that already listed as income.
Yeah, because we work on accrual accounting. So we're not cash-based accounting because we're such a big organisation. We have to prepare general purpose financial reports. So basically
in fact, what we've got is 30% of that, which is probably 3 million collected.
Yes. So total reduction in charges. So we've collected 6. So on that page 92, it's got the balance brought forward from both years. We've got the gross rates and charges demanded, so that's how much we've raised, and then it's got total reduction in rates and charges, which is 6.3, and so we've collected 6.2 million for the year.
Yep.
For the 2 months. Yeah, and the bulk of it will be in this first 2 months because we have the first instalment due on the 31st of August, plus we also have the discount with the 3% at that same time. So, yeah, August is going to be a big month. Yep.
And the other question I've got here is just probably something for our benefit is, we've got grants there, 259,000. Is there any way we can put a note to that and itemise those grants received? It's just to let us know what we've got grants for. Like
Yep.
at this stage, I don't know what that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I noticed you put notes on there, and that was a great addition.
Yeah, and I look through you, Mr Mayor, too. We want to improve on this financial reporting for you each month, and we're trying to get some things in place, but every sort of term we go to, it ends up being a dead end. But we want to actually, give you more detail, sort of per functional area and things like that on a monthly basis. So we're trying to go down that path. It's obviously been a resourcing issue for the past few years, but we've been talking about it with the audit panel, the external audit panel, a fair bit as well too. So, and then it's going to take some time to get somebody on board to help develop the reports and whatever. But yeah, we can definitely put a note in there. When the annual report comes out as well, one of the notes in the financial statements there actually details the whole lot and last year's as well as a comparison.
Yep, right.
So, this is monthly, up to date. So, looking forward, not backward. Yeah.
Yeah, and if even a session on perhaps in the induction on what councillors could ask for.
Yep.
So how are they going to use that information to make sure that they can actually achieve that strategy?
Yep.
So to understand which bits for the financial officer to do, but what are the questions as a councillor to ask that those things are in place. Just a little session on that probably would be really useful at the induction stage.
Yeah, we have talked about that.
Because we've often talked strategy but not linked it back. Yep. And if that was up front, we just sort of leave you guys to do that. But really, that's for us. Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. Part of that explanation of the 4% difference could be people are paid by instalment, or people are paid by instalment rather than upfront.
Yep, definitely too. It could be that some people haven't paid at all too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
Yep.
Okay, anything else on the financial report? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Go ahead to senior manager report.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, I'm actually going to pass this over to Tracy because the things to highlight really are all in Tracy's area, so... I could do it, but
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Just to pick out a couple of things, there has our work with the Circular Head Wellbeing Collective is continuing, and just looking at ways to potentially get a position funded for that. We've also, in terms of suicide prevention, so it says here that there's going to be a meeting with Relationships Australia, so that's happened, and we've provided data to them. We did a survey. There were 174 responses to that survey, and according to Ben from Relationships Australia, that is an extraordinarily large number, and he was very impressed that we were able to get surveys from people talking about suicide prevention. We have had the expo, the Jobs Expo, this last week on Thursday, which was really well attended. Really great feedback today around that expo. We had about 120 attendees, and we had about 38 exhibitors, and it had a really good feel when you went in there, and the Mayor was commenting today that there was people that normally recruit for fire and ambulance, was it?
Police.
Police.
Police and fire.
Yeah, they don't normally come out and recruit, but they also were trying to find people, and what they've found is people are having difficulty filling out the online forms, So they came up to this expo to be able to talk to people and show them how to fill out the information and what they had to put in. So we're currently about to go out and survey all of the stall holders. We've had some surveys that were done on people that came along to the expo, and we'll be able to present that information back to council. Charts is well and truly up and running, and you would have seen Deborah Mainwaring's portrait won the Charterboard Prize.
The portrait of the bloke doing it.
There was 103 people attended the official opening, so all of the events have been so well attended. It's just been phenomenal. There's a list there of all the people that received prizes. Also currently as part of our age-friendly communities plan, we are currently, Amber's been working on a seniors expo, and so there's a whole range of things within our plan that we'll be able to meet through having that expo. So she's been working on that, and that'll occur in October. I reckon that's
Tourism numbers?
Oh, tourism numbers. So the visitor services is going really well. The trend is higher than for this time of year back at the old site. We're still doing some cheese tasting to support the centre, and we are close to signing the agreement for the visitor centre. Any questions?
Any questions?
Oh, I just wanted to note the 450 people at the science gig.
Oh,
Tracy,
yes,
I
I
thought
missed
that was just fantastic, and to have something that sits like that for science in the area, I just think
it is phenomenal.
such a great engagement.
And the participation by the schools was really great.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising that. I did have that circled, that number, and
Yeah, I just think that's
just phenomenal.
fantastic, and it doesn't just happen.
The other thing that I was saying to Felix Ellis, because he was here today, you were talking to us about the workforce development as well, that I mentioned at the function last week. The amount of people that was, and normally the exhibitors all try to get everybody to sign up to them or do whatever, but this time people, after hearing the people that come around and hearing their story, said, oh, somebody else can help you better than me, and they actually took them to other places, and so they were working together really well, and I've never seen that happen before, so I think that we're all getting more mature with what we're doing, and if people do come in after we hear what they really want, they're pointed in the right direction, which is, I've felt really heartened by that.
The other thing I noticed on the visitor numbers, Mr Mayor, is, and I know some of it will be the newness of the centre and what's going to offer, but to see the figures of the 7330 is enormous. So it indicates to me and probably to the council that people are interested in our visitor centre, people are interested in our tourism for the whole district, and they've come and had a look what we're now offering. And I can see in the future that that visitor centre is going to provide more than tourism information. It's going to be for a whole of community information centre, and that those figures indicate that.
Thank you. Anything further? Somebody prepared to move the report?
Yep.
Happy to second.
Councillor Bosky, Councillor Retton, second. Oh, we've got the information bulletin. Is there anything there with the letters?
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, I think there's a couple that need addressing. First of all, Brian Heathorn, one is that's a state growth
That's it.
road, it's not ours, and informed of that.
Yes, I informed you that because he did ring me and talk to me, and I said, well, you can send a letter to us, but it is state growth, and what we would do was send that to State Growth, and Daniel, we could ask Daniel to talk to them when they next talk to their engineers, and but you're right, it's not our issue.
They have a reporting number.
The other one, the Green Lady's letter about taking the speed limit from 60 in the daytime to 40 of a night time. Have we reacted to her, sir? Or
Well, you probably saw in a piece in the paper today where they rang me yesterday about it, and we have got a committee together, and they will look at it, and they will come to council and talk to us about, and we've got council officers on that as well. I don't think it's going to be 60 and 40, and I don't see the need to, as I said in the paper today, I said it's not up to me because council hasn't discussed it, but I said devils are nocturnal animals, and so they're not out during the day, so why would we change the speed limit during the day? But we may well look at lowering the speed level between dusk and dawn. But that's going to be discussed at a later date.
and the other one, I see there's a letter there supporting housing development. It's not come to council yet, so we can't really make any comment much about that, can we?
And through you, Mr Mayor, I do have a meeting being set up with the Transport Commissioner in about 3 or 4 weeks once we've done the data analysis on the speed in that area in relation to the Devils question. So,
Well, thank you for that, General Manager. But it's devil thing down there, irrespective of the road thing. I'm very nervous about the numbers that they've put out to say that it was killed in that short pace of time. Some of these people, and they're capable of doing, they don't want the truth to get in the way of a good story. And I'm trying to choose my words very carefully here, but I think we need to have a very close look at that.
Okay, nothing else? We've got a mover a second. We have. The other one that I thought that we ought to just note was the Legat resolution on renewable energy. We've had a couple of letters come back from Legat now from our motions that we put up last year or year before, and so it's good to get feedback because and there has been discussions held because of the motions that we put up. So that's, and I just said to our General Manager today, we probably ought to just thank Legat for doing that because often we have done these before and we have never got anything back, so it's nice to.
And the other, sorry, and the other one, Mr Mayor, is the Eggfest holiday. I did read today where rural youth are converting Eggfest back to that first weekend in May.
It's always been stated.
Yeah, but that was, I see that officially today, sir.
Okay, nothing else. I'll put the recommendation in. All those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. We now go down to our committees, which is 13. So there's 3 committee, lots of minutes there. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blizzard. Councillor Ives Harris. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. First one is Chaddock. Is there any questions on that at all? If not, we'll go to Chill. No questions on that one either. Go to Stanley Town Hall. Nothing on any of those?
The next lot of minutes, Mr Mayor, will be an annual meeting which took place on Tuesday night, so.
Yep, no, that's fine. Okay, might have another question time because there's nobody here. So can I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Alday, Councillor Redland. Put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And then I need another one. I'm not sure if I need both those tonight. We haven't got anybody to take out, but we better follow protocol and do it. Councillor Oldacre and
Yes.
Councillor Hine. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Got nobody to kick out, so we can just keep going. Or we better make sure that...
Chairman,